Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. This is going to be part one of us working through the Ascension machine here on Hack Smarter. Now you may notice as we're going that there's chat right there. Hey, I actually used the right hand this time. I make all of these when I am live streaming. The reason for that is I believe education should be as accessible, affordable, and available for as many people as possible. And one of the ways I can do that is by making this content while I live stream. Now, if you buy the hack with me later on, as you may know if you're in it right now, you get significantly more content. You get custom notes for every single module. You get interactive quizzes to help reinforce the learning. But either way, whether you are in the hack with me or in the live stream as it happens, thank you so much for joining me. But this is part one of going through Ascension. Now, Ascension is an easy rated Linux challenge lab directly from the Hack Smarter platform. This is another great machine created by my friend Ryan, or Overgrown Carrot. You've seen a few of his machines so far on the platform. He's also a part of the QA team and overall is an amazing person. So we are going to dive into Ascension. I'm going to do my best to treat it like an actual penetration test, and I encourage you to hack right alongside of me. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and let's figure out what our scope is for today's engagement. So here's Ascension. I've already launched the machine. I still need to download the VPN, but we'll do that shortly. But if we scroll through, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that this is actually the capstone challenge for Ryan's Hacking Linux course over on Simply Cyber Academy. Really well done course. I helped QA it for Ryan. Recommend you check out his course if you would like. But as a result, this lab isn't strictly focused on realism, but rather teaching proper enumeration, lateral movement, and privilege escalation on a Linux machine. I will say, if you are studying for the OSCP, this is an incredible machine to prep for those Linux machines because it shows different forms of privilege escalation and lateral movement and even initial access. There are 6 flags on the machine. You can see the location of each by clicking the hint button to make it less of a rabbit chase. There are also multiple ways to solve the machine. So if you solve it one way, you can go back and see if you can find it the second way. So you can see flag number 1. We have just this hint, opt user1 try rockyou.txt for that key file. But let's begin with our initial enumeration. But step number 1, after launching the machine, we need to go ahead and get on the VPN. So I'm going to go ahead and download the VPN config. We have it right there. I'm going to go over to downloads. And if I could learn how to type, we'll do sudo open VPN challenge lab Ascension like so. Call that tab VPN, open up a new tab. We'll call this one our terminal. And I'm going to CD over to Hack Smarter. I'm going to make a directory for Ascension, CD to Ascension. And I'm going to go ahead and add it to my Etsy host file. Now, if you're new to the way Linux works, the Etsy host file resolves domain names and IP addresses. I like to think of it like my cell phone. If I was calling our friendly troll KLR over there, I don't actually have his number, but if I did, I wouldn't need to know his number. I just type KLR into my phone, and then my phone resolves his name to his phone number. That's sort of what Etsy host does, kind of. It just helps it so we don't have to remember the IP address. We'll do sudo nano Etsy host to open up our Etsy host file. Drop down to the bottom, paste in the IP, hit tab to jump over, and we'll call this ascension.hsm for Hack Smarter. Control X, Y, enter, and now we can see if we can ping it, and we are able to ping the machine, which shows that we have connectivity. Let me go ahead and jump over to my notes, and we'll start getting our notes set up. First, I'm going to make a table of contents at the top. It'll automatically populate with Notion as we fill out our notes. I don't know why Notion is being slow, but that's probably because I'm streaming. And we will go ahead and do an H1, and we'll call it enumeration. We'll do an H2, and we'll do nmap, and we're going to drop our nmap results right here. In Notion, we can make a code block by doing 3 backticks. 1, 2, 3. And our code block is there and ready to go. Let's go ahead and kick off some scans on this machine. You can use nmap. I like to use rustscan, especially if you're a beginner, because it's a little bit easier to remember the syntax. But if you want to use rustscan, we'll do rustscan -a, drop in our target, --, and then -a. I'll explain what these flags are doing. This first part right here is just telling, hey, rustscan, I want you to scan this IP and see what ports are open. The second part is saying, okay, once you find an open port, I want you to pass every open port over to nmap and run the -A flag against every single open port. If you know your nmap flags, that means, hey, do all the enumeration scripts edit. Let's see what is running on these ports. And you can see our scan is already done. I'm going to copy all of this right here, bring it to the top of the page. We'll do copy, and we'll jump over to our notes, drop it into Nmap. And there's already quite a few things that stand out to me. I'm just going to space out the services a little bit to make it a little bit easier for us to read. It's clearly not my problem. Oh, man. Okay, so right away we can see that we have FTP on here, and it looks like we can log in anonymously, and there is a password list. Whoops, there is a password list.txt. So we're going to want to dig into that. We have SSH. We can see if it's key-based or password-based authentication. We have a web server, it looks like, running on port 80, and we have RPC bind. We might be able to mount to something here, doing NFS mount, and get access to information. This goes along with that. And then we have some more mount in upper level ports here. But let's go ahead and do thorough enumeration of this machine. I said before that we want to treat this like an actual pen test, not just like a CTF. And so you may ask yourself, well, Tyler, what is the difference? Well, on a CTF, your goal is to get root. Go ahead and get root, find the final flag, and say, hey, I am done. I can now share that I solved the CTF. On a pen test, it's much more holistic. You want to find every vulnerability that you're able to find, treat it like an actual engagement, and really focus on proper and good enumeration, and make sure you check out every single open port on the host, and that is what we are going to do, beginning with FTP. Number one, if FTP was actually running on an internet exposed machine, well, that's a big no-no because it's not encrypted. Number two, if FTPC is running, it should not allow anonymous FTP logins, especially if there's sensitive information, what it looks like there is right here. So let's first begin with FTP enumeration. I'm going to go ahead and do an H2. Actually, an H3 is what I want to do. And I'm going to call it FTP, and I'm going to pass it to port 21. And we can go ahead and log into FTP and see what we're able to find. We'll do FTP anonymous at Ascension.hacksmarter. We'll do anon. You can do any password you want. And you can see we did successfully log in. We can do dir, and we have one file, password list. Let's go ahead and get password list.txt. And I'm curious, can I write to FTP? I'm going to try to put password list.txt as well to see if we can write to it, and we are not able to write to it. But anonymous access is enabled. We were able to download the file, but we're not able to write. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of FTP, and we will grab this for our notes. And if we were writing a pen test report, we would want this for our report as well. I'm going to go ahead and say anonymous access is enabled. And we were able to download the password list.txt file. We'll paste it in right there, showing all of that. And now let's see what is in that file. We'll cat out password list.txt, and we have just a bunch of different passwords. Password 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Let me in. It looks like some top passwords from rocku.txt or another password list might come in handy later. We'll just drop a note there. The password list.txt is literally just a file with some common passwords. Let's keep this in mind if anything requires brute forcing. All right, nothing more we'll do with that yet, but we do want to just record that in our notes. Maybe that password list.txt will come in handy later on in the engagement. Our next port that we can begin enumerating is SSH. So I'm going to go ahead and do an H3 for SSH on port 22. Now, when it comes to enumerating SSH, it's generally not going to be the way in on a CTF or a real pen test, but there is one specific thing you want to check. And that's whether or not key-based authentication or password-based authentication is enabled. If password-based authentication is enabled, this is actually something that you would report on a pen test for a client. It wouldn't be a high, but more of an informational or a low, because security best practices are to only use key-based authentication because password-based can eventually be brute force or password sprayed. So let's go ahead and check if password-based auth is enabled. Really easy to do that. You can just do SSH root at Ascension.hacksmarter. Hit yes. And you can see that we got denied, which actually tells us that's a win. That's a strength for the client. They are using key-based authentication. And that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're doing an actual pen test. You don't only want to point out, hey, here's everything wrong with the environment, but when you find something that's a strength that they're doing well, you also want to draw their attention to that. I always recommend, if you have a list of weaknesses, also have a corresponding list of strengths, saying, hey, you need to improve these areas, but here's all the things that I wasn't able to exploit, and you did a great job. So strengths are almost as important as weaknesses. They're not as important, but almost. And that's how you get returning clients, is by not being a jerk when you're doing the pen test. Let's go back over to here. What's our next one? We have a web server running on port 80, just an Apache web server. We can go ahead and dig into that one next. We'll do an H3, HTTP 80, not 90, 80. And it is Apache 2.4.58. That is a relatively up-to-date version of Apache, so I don't think there's any crazy 0 days we can drop to get initial access. But anytime there is a web server running, there's a few things that I want to check. So the one thing I want to do is run dir search on it, see if there's any hidden directories. So we'll make a placeholder for that. I don't really know if I can do vhost because I don't know what the host is going to be. I just called it ascension.hsm, but we could check for vhost too, I suppose. Virtual host. And then we'll just say like website functionality. From what I can see based on the message here, it's just a default Apache 2 page. It's not an actual website, at least on the web root there, but maybe we'll be able to find something. Let's go ahead and kick off some of these scans. We'll do dir search -u, ascension.hacksmarter. What is up, David? Good to have you here. And we'll go to vhost. Let's check out what vhost might be running. Now, if you go to my GitHub, it's Tenebrae93. You can find it, Tenebrae93 on GitHub. You can find this little vhost tool. It's nothing special. It's literally just a wraparound ffuff, but I always forget the syntax of using ffuff to enumerate vhost. That's why I made the little wrapper script. But if I go to my tools, offensive security, vhost fuzzer, -h, you can see what it takes. So we'll do ascension, ascension.hacksmarter for the domain. We'll use user share wordless dirbuster directory list to 2.3 medium.txt. And our URL is ascension.hacksmarter. Our FS filter, we don't know what it is, so we'll do 1. And you can see when I did that, all of the non-existent pages are size 10671. So we'll change it to 10671. And I don't have numlock on. That's a good thing to turn on. 10671. There we go. We'll kick off our vhost fuzzer. And now we can just go ahead and look at the website. Before I even look at it with something like Kaido, I'm just going to browse to it. And it is just, oh, thank you, Bottleneck, for dropping that in the chat. I appreciate you. It is just an Apache 2 default page. Nothing super exciting here for us, although this is another thing that you would technically report on a pen test. You don't want default pages being exposed for obvious reasons, from version enumeration to knowing this might be something in dev. If you are doing a pen test, let's say you're an external network pen test, you have, 200 hosts in scope, and you run something like Go Witness to grab a screenshot of each host. Anytime you see something that has a default page, it's always worth doing a directory brute force attack. I have noticed from my experience that these default pages often have dev directories hidden, and a directory brute force attack, you may be able to find some of those hidden directories. I don't know if that is the case here. Thank you, Crypto. Thank you for the kind words. So not finding anything for vhost, and oh, we do actually have some stuff for dir search. It looks like we have some WordPress information. Very interesting. I'm going to stop the vhost scanner for now. Yes, glad you enjoyed that tip. The reason I say I know it's WordPress is all this WP content that's standard WordPress stuff. I don't know what we even have here. So if I do license.txt, you can see that we have WordPress here. We might be able to get the version information. We have the .php, but we're not going to be able to see that. We have the README. We have some plugins, but once again, we're not going to be able to see most of these. It's weird because I'm not seeing an actual root. I'm not seeing much of a root directory for the WordPress instance. And so I don't know, this might be a rabbit hole. Oh, we have a directory listing, so this is something that you would report on a pen test. What's my, there we go, Flame Shot is what I use. If you were doing a pen test and you found a directory listing like this, this is a valid finding. It would be at least a low. And if you're able to find sensitive information on it, it would be higher. I'm going to delete this code block here. Apache 2 default page seems to be hosting some type of WordPress instance. Directory listing is enabled, and we'll paste that in. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And we could spend some time enumerating this. If nothing else, we can see what plugins are being used. We have the cert bundle. All PHP stuff, which is going to be server-side things that we're not going to be able to see much of. Sorry for the yawn. Yeah, all PHP stuff. What I'm doing now is just kind of glancing through here to see if anything really catches my eye. But this is all kind of, this is default WP include stuff, but it should not be exposed to the internet. Just theme information. What we can do is run WP scan against the endpoint. WP scan, I thought there'd be a help. Yeah, there we go. WP scan is like a WordPress scanner. You can kind of think of it like Nmap, but specifically for a WordPress website. I use it if I'm on a real engagement and WordPress is in use. I use WP scan often. We can just pass it the URL. For now, we'll see if it can even detect it. I have a feeling it won't even detect it because it seems like WordPress is like halfway installed, but not actually being used. Grab a drink of water. We'll see if this is able to hit it. Yeah. I spelled Ascension wrong. Let's try that. That deserves another drink of water. All right, so that's what I thought would happen. I don't know if it's running WordPress either. I almost feel like this is a little rabbit hole that maybe Ryan threw on the machine. I have no idea. It's a realistic rabbit hole because I see stuff like this often on real engagements. It's also, if you're doing something like the OSCP, this is the type of rabbit hole that can really trip you up. All right. The OSCP is notorious for having rabbit holes just like this on it. The only way that you can identify if something's a rabbit hole, at least from my experience, is solving machine after machine after machine. You have to get the practice in, get the reps in, build that muscle memory, and then usually within about 15 to 20 minutes of poking at something, you can make a good decision. Hey, this is a rabbit hole, or hey, this is promising. From my experience looking at this right now, I'm going to say this is a rabbit hole. If it was a real pen test, we would report that, though, at least. I'm going to go ahead and say, I don't think WordPress is fully running. We tried to scan with WP scan, but it also didn't detect a working WordPress instance. Oh, in dir search, I suppose we could drop some results if I didn't erase them. Yeah, here we go. We'll drop these results in that field. Just to take good notes, in vhosts, I'm going to say there were none available on the vhost side of things. All right, so we don't have access, but our notes are looking pretty good, eh? No WP login, so a rabbit hole. Exactly. That's a good thing to look for too. Okay, we have what looks promising, and that are these different shares. We might be able to mount them, NFS shares, and mount them and get access to something. We'll do an H3. And now I forget the syntax for this, but that's okay, because remember, to be good at pen testing or even CTFs, it's not about remembering the exact syntax for every command. It's about being able to do pattern recognition and being like, hey, I've seen this before, and I know there's a way to dig into it more, and there is. Let's go over to here, and we're going to go to DuckDuckGo. I've noticed it does a better job at indexing hack tricks, and we'll do NFS hack tricks. And well, you could see the 2049 port is open as well. And here's the big thing. A notable aspect of this protocol is its lack of built-in authentication or authorization mechanisms. Let me just scroll through here. Show mount -E. And there you go. Whoops. We do see a mountable share. I'm going to grab that for our notes. We'll paste that in there, and if you don't know how to do that, it should guide you through it. Right? We show the mount, and then we can go ahead and mount it. It says you should specify to use version 2 because it doesn't have any authentication or authorization. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to go to mine, and I'm going to make a directory. We'll call it Mount Ascension. We'll call it Mount Ascension. There we go. And now we can just copy the syntax here. But we just have to change some of it. We'll do Mount Ascension. And then what we want to mount is server NFS user 1. I think I did that correct. Ascension.hacksmarter. And I'm going to sudo it. Let me delete this. Okay, not supported. Request an NFS version or transport protocol. What if we do version 1? And it failed. There we go. I just had to do version 3, it looks like. Let's see if that worked. And it did. Okay, cool. Let's grab this for our notes. Mounting the share. And if we look at it, it gave us some private keys and a public key for a user. Private SSH key. And we can go ahead and copy those. I'm going to copy it over to HackSmarter Ascension. Then I'm going to CD over to HackSmarter Ascension. We can change the mod to 600 for the ID RSA. And if we look at the pub, we should be able to see what user this key is for. Now I realize I did that relatively quick, so let me explain what's going on. Remember when we were enumerating SSH, I said we want to see if password-based authentication or key-based authentication is enabled. Well, we said, well, this is good. Key-based authentication is enabled, which means for a user to connect to that SSH, you need a private key that corresponds to a public key on the host machine. Well, this ID RSA is a private key. You don't want other users to have an ID RSA key. Very real story. I was on an internal pen test. I was able to get an ID RSA key for a service account that was used. I used that ID RSA key and sprayed it across all the hosts in the network. That one private key allowed me to compromise over 100 different hosts, and eventually I got domain admin as a result of one key that I was able to compromise. So when you see an ID RSA key during an engagement, that's definitely something you want to dig into and see what you're able to do with it. If you don't know who the ID RSA key belongs to, and there's a corresponding .pub or public key, it will have the user's name in that public key. So in this instance, we can see that this private key belongs to a user named user1. So let's go ahead and see if we can authenticate via SSH as user1 and gain initial access to this machine. We'll do SSH user1 at ascension.hacksmarter-I, and we're going to go ahead and use the ID RSA key and hit enter on our keyboard. But now we have an issue. We need a passphrase for the key, which on that internal engagement, I didn't even need a passphrase. They did not have a passphrase on the key. This is good security. If you have a private ID RSA key, you should have a passphrase that requires someone to know that passphrase to use your key. Let's grab that for our screenshot, or for our notes rather. The ID RSA key is protected by a passphrase. All right, so how can we get access? Well, let me ask you, we have over 80 people right now in the live stream. If we are in an internal pen test or just a pen test, or we're on a CTF, the OSCP, let's say we find an ID RSA key, but a passphrase is required. What is the next step that you would take as part of your enumeration? Get a drink of water. SSH to John, exactly, Alan. So John the Ripper is able to take an SSH key and kind of spit out a hash that then can be cracked with John if we have like if it's found in rockU.txt, a dictionary type attack. Will it ask for a passphrase if none exists? It will not. If none exists, it will just allow you to authenticate with the ID RSA key. And a little bit says the password text file might have it. That's a good call. We can start with that one first. Brute force, yeah. So let me show you this to you guys. I think it's installed on Kali Linux by default, and it is. I thought it was giving me a help file. I'm pretty sure we just pass it the actual key, and there you go. We use SSH to John. We pass it the actual key, and it will spit out this crazy long hash, but that we can then crack. Let me go ahead and grab that for our notes. All right, so that's the first command that we run. Now what we want is take all of this key right here, copy it, and do nano hash.txt, paste it in. And now I forget the syntax for, I always use hashcat, not John. I think we can do John ID RSA wordless equals passwordless.txt, or not ID RSA, hash rather. Okay, yeah, it found our one password hash. And what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and compare that hash to our password list that we found. And you can see that it failed. We were not able to crack the passphrase. So because the password list failed, kind of the standard one to go to, at least in a CTF, is rockU.txt. Now, in a real life pen test, you will do some hash cracking. You're generally not using rockU.txt. You're either going to use a specialized computer with a powerful GPU, or you can actually use the cloud, AWS in particular, to crack passwords. I'll make a video about that sometime. But that's what I use for password cracking is AWS. And I spin up some instances there. But instead of password.list, let's do user share wordless rockU.txt. And maybe we will get lucky using rockU.txt and we'll be able to get into this private key. We'll see if it breaks my VM. I'm always scared when I'm live streaming and doing this, like my computer starts to melt a little bit. So we will see what happens or how long it takes. It says cost is 1 is 2 for all loaded hashes. In the meantime, We can jump back over to our notes. I don't really need this full hash in here, I don't think. So what I'm going to do is just go like this, clean it up a little bit, and we'll say full hash can be found at, geez, my VM is really smoking here. Let's see if we can do this. Hack Smarter Ascension. We got that RSA by mounting an NFS file share. It's taken a while. I'm going to press any other key for status. All right, we're between Yankees and Pebbles. Pebbles is another great streamer on Twitch. If you guys don't follow Pebbles, you should. He's a cool dude. I hung out with him at DEF CON as well. He does some hacking stuff. Just recently became a pen tester. So shout out to Pebbles from rockyou.text. Oh, we got Lizzie and I Love Jesus. Very interesting. I just made a video on what Jesus, or does, I don't remember what I called the video. Something about Jesus and hacking. It's always fun to see what the word lists are, but sometimes if you hit enter at the wrong time, it'll give you a very inappropriate password that isn't safe for YouTube. Should I take my chances? It's kind of like playing Russian roulette. Oh, my VM's just going to freeze. All right, we got Thug Life and Hamster. This is taking a little bit to crack this password. So I think what I will do is, for those of you watching this after the fact, I will use the power of video editing and fast forward this video. Hey y'all, so I actually had some issues on my end, primarily because I'm doing this while I'm live streaming, and trying to crack that password over that length of time apparently caused everything to melt. And so we kind of fast forwarded, we cheated a little bit. People in chat were able to do it via the same attack path. So if you're following along, if you run that command, it should work. But we now have the password. It is Sammy1. So we're going to pick up right there. We're going to pretend like I'm not streaming so my machine doesn't die, but we'll go ahead and say the password is Sammy1. And I'm just going to cheat a little bit so we don't waste our time breaking my VM while I'm live streaming. Yeah, actually, it's much more realistic. I used social engineering just now to get that password, but the password is Sammy1 for that ID RSA key. Let's go ahead and see if we can SSH in as user1. We'll do SSH user1, Ascension ID RSA, hit enter on our keyboard, and now it asks for that passphrase. We'll do Sammy1. And we have access as user 1. And if we look over at our machine, we can see opt user 1 for the first flag. Oh, it even gives us the hint, try rockyou.txt for that key file, which is exactly what we were doing. We'll go over to opt ls cd user 1 ls cat flag 1, and I will just show you guys the flag. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. We'll make sure it works, and we can say we have successfully retrieved flag 1. But I do think that's a great place to stop this video of part 1 of working through Ascension. We spent a lot of time doing some proper enumeration, doing our best to treat it like an actual penetration test, and eventually we got initial access. We were able to SSH in with that user's ID RSA key. Once we got the passphrase password, either with John or social engineering the people in the live chat, either one is valid, either one works. But hey, my challenge to you is go ahead and work to see if you can get flag 2. Do some lateral movement, see what you're able to do. If you get stuck, that is totally fine. Join me in the next video and we'll continue working through this one together.